Well, today I think we're gifted with an unusual program, something we don't normally have, and we have one of our members who is very excited about providing this program, and I hope that some of you will be a little bit startled, because you don't hear things like this very often anymore. They're probably included in the Patriot Act. But today's speaker is Laura Mappin. She's a member of the Humanist Community, and she's going to share her online website, our Taboo Museum, which transforms taboos through crowdsourced conversations, art, and products. She also discussed the experiences in her life that drove her to create this collaborative place of straight talk with gobs of humor. And if you want to know the rest of the story, it's under what you're sitting on or maybe holding in your hands. But at that point, I would like to invite Laura to come and give us her best shot. Big hand for Laura. Thank you, Laura. Where's the thing you're going to wear?
Oh, it's coming. Well, thanks, everyone, and thanks for the invitation to speak. I actually haven't told this story before, but I've been doing this art for about 10 years. I've been telling it in dribs and drabs over the years, so to kind of tell it more complete like this, it's a great opportunity to have, and I know I've talked to a number of you, you're actually here and excited to hear it. So I usually go slowly, timidly with people I meet, because not everyone is into this, and yet as I've been doing it for as long as I have, I just had to do this for my own mental health, if you will. So what I do now is I just gently go and look for others who are looking to do the same thing. So I should talk a little bit about, well, how I've arranged the talk is I will talk a little bit about the museum. I'll talk a little bit about what brought me to make this, and then a little bit of the science underneath it and the research that supports doing what I'm doing. Although I was already doing it, but now there's a lot of mind research coming out that supports it. So as I started putting the notes together for this talk, after about a few weeks, I did a little time test on it, and I realized I had 5 hours of stuff. So, okay, scratch this and this and this and this and this. So it's possible that some of the stuff that I said I'd talk about, I'm not going to get to, because I decided it's probably mostly important to concentrate on the museum itself. And some of the stories will come out about how I got here, because they are key. And I did not get here because I thought the idea was great. I went kicking and screaming, and there are a number of stories there where things weren't very pretty, especially about 10 years ago, which is what I allude to there. So the credentials I have a BS in computer science and a BS in math, but what I'm going to talk to you today about, I have no degrees in, therefore it won't be BS. So it's not that I want to talk about the hard stuff, it's that I cannot imagine what would happen if I didn't. And that has always been me for a long time, but I've continued to bump up against people who couldn't talk about it, and I couldn't understand why. And I found myself in various predicaments throughout younger years and even later. Yes, and I love public speaking, okay? It'll go away in a minute. What the Taboo Museum is about is basically to create a place for people trying to figure something out about their life that no other person around them can talk about. That's essentially it. And one story that I'll tell to give you the crux of it, one of the main drivers for me is about 15 years ago. I had been going back to visit my family in Pennsylvania, and I lived on the West Coast here. I've been all up and down. And I would spend my vacation time and my vacation money going to visit my folks, but after a while, I was like, this isn't working. I don't want to do this. I don't enjoy myself. We spend time fighting, you know, we're not connecting. The stuff I want to do with my life, they're not interested at all. They have other stuff they want to do that I don't want to do. I know, I don't think anything's too unusual about my story, but it's the kind of some of the things that went about around it. So, I'm sorry, this, I forget this here. So what happened was, at some point, probably my early 30s, I started thinking, I've got to do something different. I either don't go, I stay shorter amount of time, I go with a different kind of friend, I don't stay with my family when I stay overnight. I went through all this sort of stuff, but I tried them all and they didn't work. And for years I kept thinking, I've got to cut them off. I can't do this anymore. I don't want to have these conversations. I'm not coping very well. So at one point I do go back home. There's an event that goes very badly and I just say, that's it, that's it. But up until that time, I had been mentioning to friends that I'm struggling with this. And everyone's response was essentially, they're your family. You can't leave your family. They're blood. And I'm going, but I can't cope and no one is helping me figure this out. So I cut them off. I have a conversation with my mom after I get back here and I say, Mom, I can't do this anymore. And I try to explain a little bit, but there's no connection there. And so I start, as I'm on this next path, which says I don't know what else to do, I start to tell friends of mine or people, acquaintances, and it's totally different. Oh yeah, my brother's doing that right now. Oh, I have an uncle that disowned the family for 10 years, but he came back and now it's like this. That's like, where were you people before I did it, you know? So that's really that's one of the, across all the different taboo subjects that I think you see in your notes, right? Family estrangement is one of them, you know, body image is another, sexual identity, you know, just name it. Any of that sort of stuff just creates all these sorts of problems that we can't address. So if I were going through this today, I mean, I would eat this site up myself because I could bring this stuff. I don't have to actually cut them off. I might be able to find some other way to cope, right? So that's kind of what it's about. And the thing too is, which I just thought about this a couple weeks ago, is my parents could use this site as well. They could come and say, you know what, we have this daughter, we have this family reunion, we have to invite her, but when she comes, she talks about stuff we don't like to talk about. Doesn't she know? Like the last time she talked about this stuff and we didn't enjoy it, but we have to invite her because she's our daughter. You know, and I'm just thinking, why are we doing this? But we each could kind of figure out, not that I'm actually totally suggesting this, it would probably be better if we weren't in the same conversation, but you get the flavor of like whatever side you're on this, you could come to a place where people have gone through some hard stuff and have the capacity to just sit there, have the conversation, don't tell you you shouldn't do it, don't tell you you should, talk about some things that they know, like somebody else has tried it, they did it this way, that way, the other way, just have the conversation. So that's a lot of what the museum is about. So when I first started doing this art, I was heading, well, I didn't do this on purpose either, but let's see, one of the first pieces that I made about 10 years ago, it will come back. There we go. Why is it not? Oh no. Uh-oh. Oh, you know what? They got closed for some reason, so let's do this. I got it. I wonder why it's, oh sorry, I had all four open, now they're not open. Let's, okay. So this was one of my first pieces once I came out of the closet of being a crocheter, which is another story. I came up with the Crocheters Anonymous 12-step program for crocheting in public, and I had to do the tiny steps of, you know, just have the crochet stuff in my bag, but don't do it, and to go to another public place and pull it out where I won't run into anybody I know, because it was really hard to admit that I crochet. So finally, it's like, ugh, there, I crochet, okay? And it turns out, this turned out to be a piece that I became tinily well known about. But what this brings up, though, is one of the stories when I see this doily, basically what I'm thinking is, how pretty must we make something before we can talk about it? And so the vision I have when I see this doily is, I can remember when I was about 15, I came downstairs in the house to my mom. She was at the kitchen sink doing something, and I just said, Mom, I don't think I want to have any kids. And I was expecting a conversation about the pluses and minuses of having kids. I mean, it seemed reasonable enough, even though I was her kid. But to me, it was like, I want to talk about this. And so I said this, all ready for the conversation, and she said, you know, continuing to do the dishes or whatever she was doing, you're not supposed to think about that. And the first second and a half, I was livid because I was thinking, I am thinking about it, and isn't that a good thing? And don't all parents want their kids to bring these subjects to them, to have the conversation with them instead of the kids at school or whatever? And then 2 seconds later, I realized, oh, I'm standing in front of her, and I am the image of something that she didn't think about. Now, my mom and dad had 4 kids in 5 years, and really, truly, I don't think I could have pulled that off, even like they did. So this is not about blaming, although I was there in my 30s, but I'm not anymore. I get it, and I didn't want to repeat it, but I couldn't work through that with my parents, or at least with my mom. So that's what I see when I see this doily, but I have had 3 different business attire men in different business organizations, business dinners that I've talked to, come up to me and say, why don't you add a question mark? That's truth in advertising. And the first guy I started to talk to was like, no, it's this other story about my mom in the kitchen. And he goes, nah, I know what you're looking for. And the next 2 guys, I just didn't say anything. So, you know, I didn't become an artist. I spent 20 years in high tech, but when I became an artist, I did have to learn that, you know, people are going to see what you make, and they're going to make whatever they want out of it, and that's how it is. Okay, so basically, the stuff that's in the Taboo Museum, the kind of subjects that I allow are basically things you're not supposed to talk about, you're not supposed to do, and you limit your pursuit of your own happiness just so someone else doesn't have to examine their own attitudes, judgments, ideology, or fear. So it's not something like, oh, I want to go kill people, that's my pursuit of happiness, where you're going to impinge on somebody else's pursuit of happiness. So that's not what I'm talking about here. But when the only limits are somebody else's attitudes and ideology, that's kind of how I gathered all these things that go into the categories of taboos. The other thing is, in order to do this, I have to make it funny. That's just my own requirement, because I can't cope with these subjects without laughing, which reminds me, I forgot to do this. So one of the other pieces I've made, I realized it's something I should be wearing today. Everyone knows George Carlin's 7 words you can't say on TV? Okay. Well, they're crocheted in this, and it makes a perfect clergy stole. Although it's a little long for me. Just to add a little bit of humor to this of what we're doing. So I do have to make everything funny. I can't do it for all the subjects. Suicide is still a really tough one. The only person I've heard make suicide funny is Joan Rivers, and her husband committed suicide 10 or 15 years ago. Just to give you an idea of, this might not work very well, but let's just imagine. There we go. Okay, that's not too blatant, is it? You can come up later and read the words if you want. The heroes, this kind of came to me a few years ago, and for about a year or 2 I was afraid to tell anyone because my heroes just seemed an unusual group, but they've stuck with me, and it is George Carlin, Dr. Ruth, for her plain out and funny talking about sex, and Gandhi. So there's one thing, you know, I really don't want to be in people's faces about this. If people were in my face when I was struggling with some of this stuff, I could have gone backwards 10 years. So that's why I mean, I could do this very differently if I was really trying to make that kind of statement. What I'd really like to do is find people who are already here in this space, who are open to thinking about these things, and just continue to grow that connection and that awareness, and be a voice among many voices like that. There's I should have changed the, oh, you know what, I've lost, yeah. I bookmarked them, so I thought it would get the file. Okay, you may have seen this turtle caught in a six-pack ring. When I saw that, it resonated completely for me, because I think one of the things that we don't do very well as humans is we can see physical pain, we can see a broken leg, we can see abrasion, we can see cuts in the flesh, but we can't see emotional pain. And so it makes it easy for us to stay in denial. And that's one of the things that really pisses me off. I wish there was a way that we could wear something physical to show our emotional pain. But I mean, this isn't the best environment right now to do this. I'm not exactly touting this, because people still aren't very good about taking care of that. They can deny it or they can blame you for it. But if we saw it physically, if we saw it with our visuals, with our eyes, we would treat it differently. Because that's how we are. And if we can't see it, we can deny it and place it on others, or just like not look at it. So the taboos, I'll let you read the list of the taboos. You know what, I'll do it quickly, because it's huge. I thought I'd only have 2 or 3 categories that I wasn't even going to categorize them when I started. And then as I started doing this, it's like, well, there's body parts and function, which is pretty big in itself, aging, death, skin color. Now, I have pulled these out relative to how I think the conversations are going in the public sphere today, not any scientific way, but just to kind of help group the things I've got on the website, so that if you're interested in one or the other, it's easier for you to find. Sex and sex acts, talking about how we talk about them or hide them, not exactly what they, which ones are good or whatever, that's not part of it. Reproductive issues, rape, sexual identity, orientation, and expression, all 3 of those. Bigotry in all its forms, social norms, which that category just grows and grows. Parenting, mental health and relationships, money, and shame. I don't know if I want to get too many more categories, but if there's a place that something fits, I don't want to turn anything away. In fact, somebody said something about string theory. String theory is not on the list, but really I thought about that. I thought, if somebody really wants to talk about string theory and they can't find anyone to talk about string theory, and they're going through depression because they can't find somebody to talk about string theory, they can come in here and ask, I want to talk about string theory. I'll talk about string. I don't know anything about string theory, but I'll talk with you about it, and I'll help you find someone who, or maybe there's somebody else on one of the communities that can help you, talk about string theory. So I don't draw this taboo border too seriously. In the postcard, which, I'm going to let it go, but in the postcard on my website, I have all the different categories of taboos, and they're connected in ways that I see them kind of connected today, but there's nothing scientific about that. But the key thing is, in the upper right, there's a category called shame. And I have a line from shame to every other category, because you can feel shame from a money issue, from sexual identity issue, you name it. It's just all over the place. And in case anybody is aware or is watching the shame research right now with Brené Brown, I don't know if that rings a bell. I'm a groupie of Brené Brown. She's just fantastic. She's got several TED Talks out. In fact, for this talk, if you go to ourtaboomuseum.com/HCSV, it'll direct you to a page that I have a bunch of links, including to a whole page that I built on Brené Brown stuff, and a lot of the other stuff that I talk about, whether there's books that support these ideas or whatever. There's a 20, 30 links up on that page that you can go to and find. So one friend with this grid of, I'm not going to worry about getting it, but the grid, the chart that I drew of all the categories, to her it looked like whack-a-mole. That game whack-a-mole where the mole sticks out, where it's like, you have a money issue and it's coming out over here, but I don't have a money issue and it comes out in shame over here or something else. I mean, they're all kind of connected like that. If we don't get real, it comes out somehow or other. So what's in the museum? So the museum is made up of a variety of things, which I had been doing all the time for the last 10 years, but I never grouped it together as a museum until last summer. So it's my art, it's other artists' art that are touching on these subjects. There's interviews. There's one interview right now. There'll be several more coming that are in the works. There's a lot of collaborative art. And that's kind of what I want to spend a little bit of time here, because each one is a little bit different, and you'll get more of a flavor of what I'm trying to do. So in case that, excites you, you can, definitely plug in. So one of them is called TFTO, which is thanks for the orgasm. It's a collection of that phrase in all sorts of languages. So right now we have about 15. If you know of a language and you want to contribute one, you can go ahead. I'm happy to provide link backs or something, and at some point maybe we'll have like how to say this in every language on earth. But what's interesting is, it does create some scenarios, which is also what I'm trying to do. Is like one guy was trying to tell me how to say it in Portuguese, I think it was, or Spanish, and it was, he said, well, this is like the dirty version. And he was trying to say it to me, but as he said it, he felt like he was actually saying it to me. And there was no reason for him to be saying that to me, but he couldn't just say it as a phrase, which I thought was pretty interesting. Another person, she goes, she wanted to help, and she goes, we don't have a word for that. Really? Really? So she goes and asks her brother and her friends, and there's all this email going back and forth, some of it I'm copied on, and they couldn't think of a word for it, so they came up with something as close as possible. And in case anybody knows Tagalog, maybe you can help us out, but I think it's Saramat, if I'm saying it right. So what I like is, how we get to interact with each other around this relatively benign task, right? Another collaborative piece is something a friend of mine coined the name for. It's called open source proselytizing. I went into a Christian bookstore to get some material for another art project, and I happened to look in the back of one of the magazines there, and there was an article that said, if you're in, I'm not even sure what kind, it was some sort of Christian, if you're this sort of Christian and you're talking to this person who believes X and you want to convert them, tell them A, B, and C. Oh, but if you're talking to this person and they believe Y, tell them D, E, and F. I'm going, so you don't know your religion well enough and you don't know theirs, and you're just going to like walk up to people and tell them what this article told you to tell them? Really? So let's level that playing field, right? I said, I saw this spreadsheet in the sky, on the left-hand column was the religion that you are, including none, or slices of mixtures or whatever, and then across the top is the religion of the person you're talking to. And then let's just do a crowdsourced of the cells, right? You find that cell, and then 8 people have given you some feedback of what to say. So you're standing there talking to somebody on their phone, and you bring up your phone, they start proselytizing to you, and you go, oh, wait a minute, what are you again? And you just plug it in, and you just say back to them. It's like, what kind of world? Stop the proselytizing, right? But in a funny way. However, I have no skills to build this. I've just built enough of the web page that you get the idea. So if anybody really likes this and has some database background that can build some database stuff behind some web pages, and you want to talk, by all means, contact me. Another one that I've moved on more recently is what I'm calling an active listening experiment. And it's also, I also called it sitting with the hard stuff. And I just made a meetup for it yesterday. So what this is I haven't really understood why we can't have the ear of somebody when we really need it to just talk through something. It is just so helpful. It's a relatively small investment, but you have to have the right person to do it. So I'm struggling with something maybe not as major as cutting my family off, but these little things go on all the time, and we get stuck. Like this guy in the truck yesterday that cut me off, it grabbed me all day long. If I could have had the ear of somebody for like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and just go, what was going on? I think it could be really helpful, but you can't have someone that goes, oh man, it's just a truck, what are you worried about? It can't be that sort of person. It has to be, the environment is more like, yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, it's happened to me too, or whatever. And you can kind of, at least I know for me and I know for others, it works where you hear yourself, And you almost do it for yourself, but it does not work for me if I do it to the wall. You know, if I do it to a paper silhouette of my best friend. You know, in fact, I actually did consider that at one point because I needed this so much. And I saw 5 silhouettes of my friends on the wall, and then I imagined using them. And then I imagined 2 weeks later I'd talk to them on the phone and I'd be pissed because they gave me some feedback I didn't want to hear. So I didn't cut the silhouettes out. So what this meetup is I will put it out in parks, in public spaces, small numbers. You can come together. No one tells anyone what to do. You get a certain amount of time. We split it among the people there and just talk through something that's bothering you, or practice your active listening skills to just be with somebody else. So as I take this even bigger, I think, you know, I just feel like this is a really big void in how we live today. And I imagine, like, if I lived in a society that had this, I don't know what to call it, listening thing going on, where every city I went in, I knew once or twice a month for an hour, there was going to be somebody sitting in that park who I could just go, just sit with. I don't even have to say anything. I could sit with the other people. I mean, some of this is kind of done here, I think. There's tiny little bits of it I see, but in general, not in a big way. So imagine if I lived in an environment that the society said, yes, that's important enough, and we have this thing going on that people can plug in and plug out as they have time and motivation to provide that for each of us. Sometimes we use it, sometimes we support it. And we go back and forth, but we just have this little space where it's just okay to just go talk about whatever's coming up for you. So we'll see how the meetup goes. There's a link to the meetup at ourtaboomuseum.com/HCSV if you're interested and you want to find it. Okay. So just, let's see. So the best way to describe how I got here, I think, is, and I'm remembering some of these times, it was basically like I was stuck in a hamster ball and I needed out, but I couldn't see clearly how to get out. So when I interact with anyone over any of this art, or anyone, like, you know, recoils to this doily or anything else, I was there. I get it. You don't have to do anything. If you want to leave, that's fine. You don't have to participate. If it rubs you the wrong way, totally fine. I've been in all these different stages, kicking and screaming, so embarrassed about what I was doing, so embarrassed that I even crocheted, and this was before I crocheted that. I was just crocheting doilies, regular doilies. I mean, G-rated doilies. A couple stories that let me know I was on the right path. And one was this was about 2002. I used to do a lot of book art. So I would make books out of any material I could find, including like the little green grasses in sushi, or, you know, tons of stuff, but it was mostly G-rated. And some people there knew that I was experimenting in this other art. So they said, go put some of your art up with your books. I'm going, I can't do that. It's a G-rated family book arts show, you know? No, it's fine. It's okay. You just, you know, put it off to the side and the right people will find it. Well, they were right. So I had one piece that was my only uncircumcised piece, and it was sitting to the side underneath some of my books. It wasn't totally, you know, visible, but if you looked, you could find it, and no kids were going to be able to reach and see back there. So at one point, this guy walks by, an older Asian Indian guy, and he sees it, and he picks it up, and he handles it like a baton from a band director, and he starts talking to me, and he goes, you know, in India, we don't circumcise. And I sat there going, he's talking to me just like I want people to talk to me. I just want these like plain conversations, and he was doing it, and it's happening, you know? And I was also telling myself, calm down, don't let him know how excited you are, or he won't know what to think, you know? So I was like just trying to be really low key, just have the conversation. He put it down, he went to the next table, and that was it. And that was exactly what I was looking for. It's like, oh man, my friends were right. They were artists. They'd already been through all this, and I was totally new to it. Another story that is even more telling of all the things that I'm trying to do and where I'm coming from. I call it my magical story because it warms my heart in so many ways. So I had some dental work that I had to have done up in San Francisco, and I was going up there quite frequently. And over time, I would go early to miss the traffic, but then I had an hour to spare, so I'd go to a cafe. Over time, I met the same father and son duo at this cafe. He was taking his son to school nearby. And after about 4 or 5 meetings, you know, we started to recognize each other, and the father says to me, "My son wants to know what you're making." And I thought, well, I can't really tell him because I'm actually crocheting tampons right now, but I'll say tree ornaments. So he goes, "Oh, okay." And then, so he tells the son, and then the dad says, oh sorry, no. So I'm thinking, I gotta keep this going. I happen to have a life-size small intestine crocheted in my bag. And I pulled that out, and I said, "Oh, and I've made one of these too." And it's really variegated orange, you know, it's really pretty, it's soft, bright. And they're both looking at me. Now, this is San Francisco, and they did seem like San Franciscoites, you know, everything's cool. But they looked at me like, "Why did you make that?" And I'm thinking, what do I say? You know, they're supposed to already know this, right? But they were so cool. And so the dad, he turns it and he goes, "Well, what other sorts of body parts do you think she could make?" And I'm thinking, "Dad, he's 4 years old. I know where this is going, but you know what? If you go there first, I'm with you." Okay? And then I said, "Oh, wait a minute, Laura. You know what? He might have an aunt who's on dialysis, and he's going to say kidney, so, you know, don't get too excited here." Well, you know, he says penis, and I'm thinking, I make those too. And Dad says, "Well, what color would you like?" And the boy and the father are white, and the boy asks for a black one. That's the only color thread I don't have, but I go and buy some. I said, "I'll make you one." And I did. And I brought it back. It was around Christmas. He hung it on the tree. His parents, I had never met the mother, but they sent me a picture of this on the tree and a letter from the mom thanking me for doing this. And then in the letter too, they said, and later on he said, "Oh, maybe I should have asked for a white one." But I just thought, you know, we could talk about this, pretty much strangers, with a kid and his parents, his father, you know, and that was okay. I mean, that's why I'm doing this, right? That story is, you know, the one I treasure the most that really talks about why. So, let's see. I think I just may stop there because I could talk some more, but oh no, I have to tell one more story. But I know how good this group is with, you guys have great questions. I've been to a number of talks here and I really like the questions you come up with, so I'd like to give a fair amount of room for that. So there's one story to tell before closing, I think. Yeah. So one thing that I haven't touched on too much here that I did allude to in the write-up is the parent-child relationship. I talked a little bit about it. But in my lifetime, I have seen, and I have my own story, granted my parents have their version too, and this is not to get on any parents or kids. This is to say, and there's a lot of books that are out there talking about this, which are on our taboomuseum.com/HCSV, including For Your Own Good by Alice Miller. I don't know if anyone knows that one. She talks about Hitler's childhood. George Lakoff and Moral Politics, and the nurturant parent versus the strict father family, that sort of stuff. And there's a number of stories I can tell from my own past, my own history, you know, thinking I was going to end up in prison, and that I think that came out of some of the stuff I saw when I was young and how I was treated in some ways. But again, I do think mine was on the typical side, which is kind of the horror of it, because I think we don't really give this a whole lot of weight in our society. Like, once somebody commits a terrorist act, they look at that person solely. I mean, I see it in the news, and this is what concerns me. And I'm not saying don't arrest the person, don't make him pay for what he did, but let's understand this a little deeper. That can't be just solely him, I don't think. People who are treated well when they're young don't do that stuff. So to make this lighter so we can handle it a little better, so I can handle it a little better, one vision I had was, does everybody know the story, The Cat in the Hat Comes Back, Dr. Seuss, right? Where the two kids are it's raining outside, they can't go outside, they're bored, they're looking out the window, sitting on the chair, and there's like, there's nothing to do. And then the cat shows up. And there's always entertainment when the cat is there. Well, as mom shows up later, I don't know, the bedspread, I forget what first is dirty, but they say, well, that's mom's bedspread. It's dirty, we can't leave it dirty. Oh, that's no problem. You just shake it like this and all the dirt comes off. And see, the bedspread's like new. But now it's on her dress, her favorite dress, you know, and so everybody remembers, right, where it goes from one thing to the next to the next. Well, that's kind of how I see the parent-child thing in some way or another. And a lot of parents are aware of it now, but there's still so many who aren't. And how do you get in front of that? Like if I'd been a parent in my 20s like my parents were, I would have done a lot of the same stuff because I didn't have the coping mechanisms, you know. But that's one of the most key points here of just that I think is so important of not, you know, the parents can kind of take care of themselves by dumping on the kids and just putting their own garbage into their kids, which for your own good is I think is a pretty good read. If this is new stuff for you, although it's heavy and it's hard. Maybe George Lakoff is better. There's many others, I'm sure. But that's one of my biggest concerns of doing this, and of just also, I can say this now, and I could not have said it 20 years ago, to have compassion for my parents. I mean, I know I would have done the same thing if I had been their age and had to do that, which was why I was asking her at 15, why should somebody have kids? Okay. All right, so with that, I'll go ahead and close and just say that I think it is healthy to look at the hard stuff in a safe environment, and that's what I'm trying to do with this museum, with humor whenever no one is taken down by it. So, thank you.
So we have a microphone. Put your hand up and I'll bring it round for questions. 1, 2, I see 1, 2, and 3. Okay.
So this crowd is self-selected in one particular topic, which for at least some of us has been shame and taboo and other, and yet on your list, religion and specifically atheism did not appear. Does it belong, or is it not taboo, or?
That's a great question, and seriously, I don't have too many people to have these discussions with, so I'm happy to have them with you. And for right now, I would say I could imagine putting them into the social norms category, or making a new category of, you know, life philosophy.
Or it keeps going into shame, too.
Well, yeah, shame's connected to everything. So really, truly, this is a hard place for a lot of people. And I often make progress around a certain subject with that person, or a certain subject with this person, but it's taking, you know, most people don't live here, that's for sure, and most people don't think about this stuff like I think about it. So I really have to kind of be careful. So that's a short way of saying, or a long way of saying, I'm really interested in conversations about this stuff. If you're interested, I would love to talk with you about it.
I'm Andrea Dory, and one of the things I was wondering about was that you don't have bullying on the list, and this seems to be such a big thing now, cyberbullying, bullying in school, bullying of gays, that kind of thing. And I think if you look into shame, you'll find that there, because people feel ashamed that they were bullied. And I wanted to say one thing to you about the truck that cut you off. One of the things I do when somebody does something stupid, and they do it out there a lot, especially drive time, I just say, baby, go get your ticket.
Hi, a very interesting talk. One question that I would ask as a parent, I agree that there's a ton of shame put on things that is incorrect, but there is a place in life for shame. For instance, I would like my child to be ashamed if he's completely selfish and, you know, bullies other kids. So, you know, and I think there is some, you certainly hear a narrative lately that maybe parents have gone a little bit, some parents have gone to the other side of being so tolerant that their children end up feeling entitled or something like that, you know, and I'd just like you to address, you know, what is a good way to sort of, you know, do the right thing in terms of, I mean, there are some negative issues that you have to explain to your children. How do you make the distinction?
So where I come from is what I've learned recently in the last couple years from Brene Brown. She is fantastic, and she talks about the difference. Brene Brown, if you go to ourtaboomuseum.com/HCSV, you'll find links to her stuff. In fact, I built a whole page of the stuff that she's done, and you can definitely go to her website too, but she really addresses this, and she's really entertaining, and she's honest, she's vulnerable, she tells her own stories about how she's come through this. She's very funny and very real. I really, really like her. And what helped me in this, which I think is what you're asking about, is she, and again, I've been in other conversations where people don't use the words this way, so be that as it may. I really like the way she uses them. Shame is I am bad. Guilt is I did something bad. And she's a big fan of guilt. She has 2 kids, but she's not a big fan of shame. And when I think about it, I'm thinking if I'm feeling shameful, by those definitions, I am already bad. Why even try? I might as well just keep being bad. I don't have a chance of doing any better because I'm already bad. Whereas if I did a bad thing but I'm not a bad person, well, there's an opening. So, but it's kind of tricky. Like some of the conversations that people that I see and hear, not everyone can tell the difference of, you know, when something is said that's very shameful versus not. I mean, a lot of people can't really pick up when that is. So hopefully that's helpful. Brene Brown.
Yeah, I'm Jerry Grass. I'm very intrigued by a sentence in this description here, the one that says, then she spent almost 20 years in high tech being exposed to near fatal amounts of left brain behavior. I spent about over 30 years in high tech, and I can make some guesses, but I'd really like to know what you mean by that.
Did I get the brains mixed up? Right brain is supposedly creative and left brain is logic, right? Yeah. Okay. As I was there, as I spent my time there at company after company and position after position, I could tell there were parts of the right brain that were not supposed to be shown. I had parts of my brain that I really couldn't show. I mean, there were times, especially later on, that I got to be known as, you know, the holistic manager or something. And I'm thinking, why is he saying that? Is he saying that because that's a positive thing or a negative thing? And no one was ever called that. And it's not always to your advantage. It was not always to my advantage to show that. I just couldn't help it. And also, I don't think it's a great fit because most people don't cope with that in my own experience. I guess the other thing too is that for me, I see so much value in the right brain, and I know there's lots of conversations around this now about, you know, innovation and creativity in business, but from my own perspective and only the things that I see, it seems like they're still doing it in a left brain way. It's hard to mix them, and it's hard to be over in the right brain in that environment, and yet I have too much right brain stuff going on that, you know, in a lot of the typical companies, I'm not a good fit. So I don't know if that answers your question. That's kind of what I was talking about.
Any more questions? Hi, I have a response to. Sorry, was there a question? So I have a response to your TFTO. Which was, what was it again? Anyway, it's NCICTP, which by the way is gender independent. Now, can I come too, please? Anyway, more questions? Oh, you, sorry.
So, Laura, could you describe to us how, you said you've made connections with people. Has it been exclusively through your site, or, you know, how do these connections appear? The connections about people who are kind of on the same wavelength with you on this.
Well, there aren't too many that are like really solidly there. I think what I do scares some people, and it scared me, but I had to get past that. And so to connect with others who are there, well, it takes a while to actually describe where I'm at, for one. But what I was meaning there was like, you know, somebody might be thinking a lot about how they're parenting, and so they're really digging into that, and so we can have a bit of a conversation around parenting aspects of this, but we don't talk about sexual identity issues, or we don't talk about money, or not that we try not to, but it just doesn't come up, you know, and it doesn't grow into a bigger thing like that.
So is it like the little scenarios you described, like where you were doing your crocheting and you, and that was what sparked the interaction? I just didn't know whether you get a lot of responses on your site. And
you know, I get a lot of people who send me links to stuff that they think is, you know, is appropriate for our Taboo Museum, and they're often right, you know, and I really appreciate the links. I also know that 80 to 90% of them send it to me anonymously. They don't want me to say who sent it. And so by default, I never say, unless I already know that person is okay with that. But over time, you know, I mean, I had one person, I didn't even know who he was, and he was telling me about something, and I asked him, you know, for a link to go there, and he goes, but don't tell them I sent you. And I was going, I don't even know who you are. I mean, like, people are really afraid, you know, to talk about this stuff in general terms. Now, I have crossed paths with someone who's doing philosophy dinners, a meetup called Philosophy Dinners around the world. He's now actually building it. He's been building it for about a year and a half, 2 years, and we've been talking. And he's a great, great resource, and he totally gets what I'm doing. He's very supportive, and some of the mechanisms that he's using to build his meetup, he's sharing with me, and we're talking about how it might work. It might be the same, it might be different. But there are a few people here and there, but you know, I'll tell you one story. I was talking about skin color, and I had just learned about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, that in 1950 there was an article on the front page of the New York Times that said, I have it here, but it's something like skin color, there's no biological reason for skin color to be the driver for race. Race is a sociological construct, okay? And I told that to one friend of mine, and she said, everybody knows that. I'm going, I didn't know that, and I've been looking. I even asked this one guy, I mean, I picked my people carefully, and I thought he was friendly enough, and he was this guy in India, and I don't know, this sounds like a stupid question, because why didn't he ask me the reverse question? But I asked him, so, you know, what is it, your skin is not quite the same kind of dark as the dark colors I see from people with backgrounds from Africa. And granted, that's not really true, but that's what I had seen. And I thought he'd be friendly enough to have the conversation, and he looked at me like, who are you? And he didn't say a thing. And I thought, I'm sorry, but I'm really curious, does anyone know the answer to this? So when I heard about that New York Times article, I thought, I didn't know it. And so then I was telling friends of mine, 3 in particular, all college educated, all at least 40 or older. And they said, well, but we need to have race so that people know if they're at risk for sickle cell anemia. I'm going, you're kidding me. Do you know what it sounds like you're saying? And I couldn't even say what I was feeling. We really have to have what we have had just so these people know about, you know. So Nina Jablonski has written the book, Living Color. She just came out with it a few years ago. Fantastic book, or a year ago. She's also done a TED Talk up at that our Taboo Museum / HCSV is links to her books and her TED Talk. Great stuff. So this is the world that I'm in, and when I cross paths like that, it's like, what do I do? And I didn't know this. I didn't know this up to 2 years ago, and I've been curious.
We have a group here that meets every morning before the general meeting, and there's about 10, 11 people that usually come, and it can be anyone. We talk about feelings, problems, things that they've experienced and that they want to talk about. It's not always successful, and sometimes people get off a track and start talking about the weather and this and that. But it can be very helpful, you know, to be able to talk about something that's bothering you, and so that you realize that, gee, other people have the same problem or are dealing with the same problem, and you get a release of being able to get it off your chest, and maybe finding out that you're not alone, and getting help from others.
I'm so with you. In fact, as I've struggled without having that when I needed it, and trying to make all the other things work, whether it's journaling or talking out loud or talking into a recorder that I play back for myself, and none of it worked, all I can say, and I know there's no research yet, I don't think, that backs this up, but all I can say is my brain functions differently when there's an active listener, a calm, thinking person there with me. I even speak differently. And different people will let me speak. I will speak differently depending on who's there. There's something in the brain that is different.
Yeah, hi Laura, thanks for a great talk. I was wondering what the science was that you said was sort of supporting some of the things that you do. And I was just wondering what that science is.
So Brene Brown is a big one. She did a ton of research talking about how people take care of themselves. And I don't know if people are hearing the word wholehearted. Also, Kristen Neff talks about the support systems we have for ourselves. We have according to her, and again, there's a link for her talk there, we have a reptilian safety system, and we have a mammalian safety system. The reptilian one gets us going with cortisol and adrenaline to run away from a lion. The mammalian one, I'm doing it quickly here, but the mammalian one operates on opiates and oxytocin. And so when a mammal needs comforted, it doesn't get beaten to go run away from something. It gets held, we respond to that sort of touch. And here's the slam dunk for me on her thing. I might be getting off a little bit here, but if we treated our friends the way we treat ourselves sometimes, that has been something I've been undoing for myself for the last couple years. It's like if I talk to others the same way I talk to myself, and it turns out lots of people do this, and I don't know how true it is here, but oh, why did you do that? You know that didn't work last time. Why did you do it again? I would never tell my friend that. So that's more the mammalian, the caring aspect, rather than the reptilian beating yourself up. Reptilian is great when it's something else and you're trying to get away from it, or it's going to eat you or something. Then that stuff works. But when it's you, it's like you kind of, the adrenaline and the cortisol, the stress hormone, just eat you up from the inside. So.
Have you had any insights or epiphanies on how to talk to people about things that they don't want to talk about? I'm thinking particularly of families here. My parents are in their 80s and 90s, and they've both got their share of ailments. My mom just got out of the hospital, and yet will not talk about the fact that she might not survive, that this might not have a good outcome.
She's gonna die.
Bottom line, I don't think we can really make anyone talk about something that they don't want to talk about. And I think I step back from that a little bit too. I have to leave it at that person's choice, unless it's some sort of issue like, family members are voting against women's rights, and I'm standing in front of them. something like that where it's going to really impact my life. Whereas, and maybe there is some issue like that that comes up in this case, but actually there's a great example of the same thing, I think. I was following this blog. This guy was a consultant, and he would help people in their businesses. And one of his posts he wrote, he said, and I'd been reading him for about 6 months, 8 months, he was pretty interesting, and one of his posts he said, you know, what do I do when I'm giving this person advice and they won't take it? I know what's best for them, and I unsubscribe. Because bottom line, I mean, he may think he knows, but there's so much more about that person that he probably doesn't know, and I can't, if I were in your shoes, I wouldn't be able to say that it would be a good thing to talk about. Maybe it makes sense to me that it would be good to talk about it, but I don't know what's going on in their head. And so, I can't totally take it all in. I mean, and maybe the situation's different, and I don't want to, but that's kind of how I don't try to make anybody talk about anything. In fact, I think giving them room to not talk about it is the best thing that gives any chance whatsoever of them talking about it later.
So we've got 3 questions and probably just 3 or 4 minutes, Laura, just so you know.
Hi, I enjoyed your talk. I really do enjoy your talk, and I was thinking, there's only one area where you hit one of my hot buttons, and that has to do with guilt and shame. My understanding is that the Buddhists call shame that comes from within, guilt comes from without. That's stuff where someone's pushing on you. So they have a slightly different kind of way of looking at it. I will tell you this much, I spent some of my greatest struggles learning to overcome guilt because someone was telling me I should feel a certain way and trying to induce shame in me. So anyway, I'm just not sure where that fits into the context you were talking about.
I was in another conversation, and it was a bunch of people with a lot more degrees in this stuff, and I said, but we all were using these words differently, and I said, well, let's make up some new words then, and one means this and one means that, and because, yeah, to argue that is, but, well, there's also another aspect here I'm sensing, is that when somebody tells you that you should feel a certain way or another, I don't think most of us are raised to be fully, one word I like, agentic, our own agents of our own lives. And so we are often raised that we should do a whole bunch of things, and people don't really teach us to not accept that. And we kind of grow up, and some of us learn how to do it later, but it doesn't usually come with a lot of childhoods I'm aware of.
This is Bob Gaunt. One of the a general type of taboo is to challenge sacred cows. And
I'm
I
sorry,
think
the what?
one of the sacred cows, and one of the sacred cows I think is nationalism. It's all over the world. People think, you know, our people, we're the best nation in the world, you know, our people, we're special. And if you suggest that nationalism is like racism or even more dangerous than racism, people don't want to hear that. The idea that we're the greatest country in the world. And the idea this could challenge the immigration issue. Illegal aliens? Wait a minute. As far as the Native Americans are concerned, the rest of us are illegal aliens. So I think that this is something I think that, and it's all over the world, and each nation feels that way. And it's also connected with national sovereignty. And we're a sovereign nation. We can build whatever weapons we want to build. We'll start wars when we please, and so on. And right now we're challenging Iran's sovereignty. Iran feels we're sovereign. We'll make whatever weapons we want. So, and the same with North Korea. This is a worldwide problem. Humanity is in danger because of all this. And so, that's what I have to say.
So, because I can get totally overwhelmed with the state of the world, I do have to kind of back up and just like, here's my voice, this is what I'm going to do, this is where I'm at. But I definitely see a link to that. And what can I do? I can create a space where more people who are already willing or half interested and then get more interested start to develop their own sense of themselves, and they decide that that's something that they need to work against, like national, or speak more about how nationalism isn't healthy or whatever it is. So yeah, I've thrown myself out there way too far and have had to bring myself back and just and help be, join the other voices that are at this level in hopes that people, I don't know, I mean, if it makes sense to enough people, then we've got something going, right? I mean, critical mass, tipping point.
Hi, Dana St. George. I can't help but wonder, there's been a lot of talk lately about privacy concerns on the internet, and so I'm kind of wondering if, that might explain why some people are reluctant to tell all their most personal details in such a place.
Well,
Lunch is ready, so brief answer, Laura?
Even 15 years ago, when it wasn't such a big concern, I was there. I would not talk about this stuff. I wouldn't put a lot of this stuff in email. And something, for me, I had to come out. I understand not everyone wants to, and that's fine with me, but I can totally relate to that, and I will accommodate it as best I can.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.